1988, a man named Stuart Turner convinced Ford to let him saw a Sierra in half and stuff the body of a family hatchback on top. The result would either be the most embarrassing failure in Ford's motorsport history, or the car that finally broke Lancia's 6-year death grip on world rallying. Spoiler, it was somehow both. To understand why Ford went to such absurd lengths, you need to understand the scale of what they were up against. The Lancia Delta Integrale wasn't just winning rallies in the late 1980s and early 90s, it was demolishing the entire field with a consistency that bordered on cruelty. 6 consecutive World Rally Championship manufacturers' titles, 46 WRC victories across all its variants, 4 Drivers' Championships. From 1987 to 1992, the Italian machine owned the sport so completely that other manufacturers were essentially showing up to fight over the remaining podium spots. The Integrale started life as something genuinely modest. Giorgetto Giugiaro, one of the most celebrated automotive designers in history, penned the original Delta in 1979 as a compact hatchback. A nice, sensible European car. It won European Car of the Year in 1980. Nobody, absolutely nobody, looked at it and thought this thing is going to become the most dominant rally car ever built. But Lancia had a plan, and more importantly, Lancia had Fiat's money. When the FIA banned the insane Group B cars at the end of 1986, following a string of fatal accidents, including the death of Henri Toivonen and co-driver Sergio Cresto on the Tour de Corse, Group A became the top tier of world rallying. The new homologation rules demanded manufacturers build at least 5,000 road-legal versions of their rally cars. This was supposed to keep things sane. Lancia was ready. They already had the Delta HF four-wheel drive in production, with all the crucial pieces conveniently sitting on the shelf. A turbocharged 2-liter Lampredi twin-cam 4-cylinder engine. A sophisticated all-wheel drive system originally developed for the Delta S 4 Group B car. Fiat poured resources into the program through Abarth, their performance and racing division, and the partnership was lethal. The technical edge was real. The Integrale used a torsion rear differential, short for torque sensing, that reacted to traction changes almost instantaneously. Unlike a viscous coupling that takes a moment to respond, the torsion transferred torque to the wheel with more grip automatically, at ratios from 10% to nearly 100%. The response was functionally immediate. On a rally stage where the surface changes every 50 meters, that kind of mechanical intelligence was worth seconds per kilometer. And the drivers Lancia attracted were the best alive. Juha Kankkunen, Miki Biasion, Didier Auriol, Markku Allen, Carlos Sainz, Walter Röhrl. At one point or another, they all wore Lancia overalls. Biasion won back-to-back drivers' titles in '88 and '89. In 1988 alone, the Integrale went 12 consecutive rallies without a loss. 12 in a row. Think about that. In a sport where mechanical failure, punctures, and random rocks can end your day at any moment, this car won 12 times in succession. Nobody could touch them. The car evolved relentlessly. The original 8-valve engine gave way to a 16-valve version in 1989, producing around 200 horsepower in road trim. By 1991, the final evolution arrived, the Evoluzione. Wider wheel arches, bigger brakes, stiffer body, improved suspension and aerodynamics, a more powerful engine. Engineers estimated it was 5 to 6% faster than the previous version. But the Evoluzione represented the absolute maximum from a platform designed in 1979. Lancia knew it. No successor was coming. At the end of 1991, Lancia officially withdrew as a factory team. For 1992, the semi-private Jolly Club outfit from Italy carried the flag and remarkably still won the manufacturer's championship, the 6th consecutive title. Didier Auriol won 6 rallies that year and nearly claimed the driver's crown before Kankkunen, now at Toyota, pipped him at the end. But the writing was on the wall. The Delta was aging, the Empire was running on fumes and borrowed time. Now. Ford's situation during this entire era was, to put it generously, not great. The Mark I and Mark II Escorts had been rally legends throughout the 1970s. Ari Vatanen, Bjorn Valdegard, Hannu Mikkola. They'd all built their reputations in those rear-wheel drive machines. Ford won the WRC's very first Drivers' Championship in 1979 with Valdegard. The brand and rallying were inseparable. Then the world moved on, and Ford didn't move with it. The switch to front-wheel drive for the Mk3 Escort in 1980 killed any rally potential stone dead. Ford attempted to build a rear-wheel drive rally car from the Mk3 platform, the RS 1700T project. It was scrapped before it ever competed. They built the RS 200 for Group B, a mid-engine four-wheel drive monster that showed genuine promise. It managed exactly 1 year of competition before Group B was abolished entirely. Money spent, nothing to show for it. Then they pressed the Sierra Sapphire Cosworth 4x4 into service as a Group A rally car. This went about as well as you'd expect when you send a family sedan to fight a purpose-built rally weapon. The Sierra was big, heavy. It had the agility of a small apartment building. Against the compact, nimble Integrale, the Sierra was bringing a broadsword to a knife fight and wondering why it couldn't keep up. In four-wheel drive form, the Sierra Cosworth never won a single WRC event. Not one. The rear-wheel drive version managed one lonely win, courtesy of Didier Auriol on the Tour de Corse in '88. But that was a different car and a different conversation. Ford was spending serious money and losing. The situation was getting genuinely embarrassing, so Stuart Turner had his idea. And it was unhinged in the best possible way. Turner was no amateur. He'd been appointed head of Ford Motorsport Europe in 1983, and before that, he'd won the first-ever British Rally Championship as a co-driver alongside Ron Goulbourne back in 1958. He'd done it again in '59 with John Sprinzel. He knew rallying at a molecular level. He knew what Ford needed. And his solution required everyone around him to suspend disbelief. The new Mark V Escort was designed exclusively for front-wheel drive. The floor pan had no provision for a longitudinal engine, no tunnel for a prop shaft, no mounting points for rear drive shafts. The platform simply could not accommodate the powertrain needed for competitive rallying. But Turner looked at the Sierra Cosworth's proven mechanicals, the turbocharged 2-liter engine, the four-wheel drive gearbox with its Ferguson viscous coupling, the suspension geometry, all components thoroughly tested and understood through years of competition, and he thought something radical. What if we just used the bottom half of a Sierra and the top half of an Escort? John Wheeler, Ford Motorsport's chief engineer, drafted technical drawings proving it could work. A shortened Sierra floor pan could fit underneath Escort body panels. Wheeler and colleague Mike Morton built a proof-of-concept mule at Ford's Borum facility in Essex. On the outside, it looked like a Mark IV Escort RS Turbo. Underneath, pure Sierra Cosworth. Stig Blomqvist, the 1984 World Rally Champion, helped with testing. Then key Ford executives were invited to drive it. A thrash up and down the A12 highway was apparently all it took. They loved it. Green light, 1989. The project was codenamed Ace 14. Everyone just called it Ace. The exterior design was contracted to MGA Development in Coventry, where a team led by Steve Harper faced a contradictory brief. John Wheeler wanted something aerodynamically aggressive for rallying. Ford Europe's marketing wanted something soft and consumer-friendly. Harper had to satisfy both. The first prototype was finished during Christmas 1989 and shown to the press in early January 1990. But it was the rear wing that would define this car for eternity. Frank Stephenson was a young designer at Ford's studio in Cologne, Germany. He'd joined in 1986, fresh out of the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California, full of ideas that hadn't been filtered through decades of corporate caution. He was assigned the wing. His inspiration came from an unexpected place, the Fokker DR-1 triplane, the Red Baron's World War I fighter. If 3 stacked wings generated lift efficiently enough to dominate aerial combat, Stephenson reasoned, 3 stacked wings could generate downforce to dominate rally stages. He designed a triple-decker rear spoiler for the Escort. It was tested in Ford's wind tunnel at the Merconic Design Center in Cologne. The results were impressive, measurably more downforce, a visual statement that screamed intent. Stephenson was convinced it would complete the design, making the Escort an automotive triplane. Ford's accountants looked at the production costs, too expensive. The third wing was killed. What survived was the iconic whale tail, a double-decker arrangement with a large lower spoiler and an upper wing element connected by a central spur. Stephenson has never entirely recovered. He once compared the production car to a child born with 9 fingers instead of 10. But the whale tail worked brilliantly. Combined with an adjustable 3-position front splitter, the Escort RS Cosworth became the first mass production car in history to generate meaningful downforce at both the front and rear. Up to 45 newtons at the front, 190 at the rear, at 180 kilometers per hour. The drag penalty was an increase in coefficient from 0.34 to 0.38 versus the standard Escort. Lower top speed on straights. On a rally stage where the car that exits a corner fastest wins, nobody cared about top speed. The math was simple. More grip equals more speed. Under the hood sat the Cosworth YBT, and the name Cosworth carried weight. Founded in 1958 by Mike Costin and Keith Duckworth, 2 former Lotus engineers, the company had built the most successful Formula One engine in history, the DFV, with 154 Grand Prix victories. The name itself was formed from their surnames, Cosworth. When Ford partnered with them to develop a turbocharged engine for the Sierra program, Cosworth set 2 conditions. The street engine would make at least 204 horsepower, and Ford would buy 15,000 engines, 3 times what motorsport needed. Ford accepted. The surplus engines made it economically viable to put the power plant into the Sierra, the Sapphire, and ultimately this unlikely Escort. The YBT variant in the Escort produced 224 horsepower at 6,250 revolutions per minute and 224 pound-feet of torque at 3,500 revolutions per minute in standard road trim. 2 liters, inline 4-cylinder, turbocharged by a Garrett T35 unit. The engine was mounted longitudinally, which was frankly bizarre for a car shaped like a front-drive hatchback. Power went through a 5-speed manual gearbox to a permanent all-wheel drive system with a 34 to 66% front-to-rear torque split. That rear bias was absolutely deliberate. 2/3 of the power going to the back wheels meant the car wanted to rotate into corners. It gave the Escort an aggressive, rear-led handling character that rally drivers could exploit. On tarmac, in skilled hands, it was devastating. The car practically pivoted around corners. The chassis were sent from England to Carmen in Germany, where workers cut, fitted, and readjusted the Sierra-derived floor pans to accept the Escort's body panels. The build quality was evident. Doors shut with reassuring thumps. Of the entire Escort body, only the front doors and roof were interchangeable with a standard Mark V. Everything else was bespoke. The bonnet with its cooling vents, the flared wheel arches, the sculpted bumpers, the tailgate with that wing. This was a rally car wearing a very thin disguise. Production began February 19, 1992. Ford caught a break here. The FIA had reduced the Group A homologation requirement from 5,000 road cars to 2,500. Building 5,000 hand-assembled Escort Cosworths would have been brutally expensive. 2,500 was achievable. Ford ultimately built 7,145 between 92 and 96 because the road car genuinely sold. The first 2,500 were stripped-down motorsport base models in diamond white with minimal equipment. After those, Ford offered civilized versions with creature comforts. Launch price was around £21,000. For that, you got a car that could embarrass Porsches while looking like your neighbor's commuter had developed a serious anger problem. If you're enjoying this, hit subscribe. We do deep dives like this regularly. All right, back to the story. Could this Frankenstein creation actually beat Lancia? The answer came faster than anyone predicted. Monte Carlo Rally, January 1993. The Escort Cosworth's very first World Championship event. François Delacour and Mickey Biazian, Ford's two factory drivers, took the brand-new car to the most prestigious and challenging rally on the calendar and immediately went first and second. They led Monte Carlo on their debut with untested machinery. On the final night, Didier Auriol in a Toyota Celica mounted a furious late charge and stole the victory. The Ford settled for second and third. A heartbreaker, but the message was unmistakable. This car wasn't promising. It was already there. Malcolm Wilson, driving a car prepared by his own team rather than the factory operation, entered the Swedish rally the following month and briefly led the event before crashing out. For reference, Wilson's stage times were faster than those of the official rally winner, a young Scotsman named Colin McRae. Portugal. Round 3. Delacour led from the opening stages to the finish line. Biazian crossed the line behind him. A Ford 1-2. The brand's first WRC victory in 5 years, delivered on only the Escort Cosworth's second-ever World Championship start. Delacour won again in Corsica, flying around the narrow French island roads where the Escort's aerodynamic grip and tarmac-friendly chassis were absolutely devastating. The Tour de Corse was considered the ultimate test of a tarmac rally car, and the Escort passed it decisively. Then Biazian took his first victory in 3 years at the grueling Acropolis Rally in Greece, an event notorious for destroying cars on its rocky, punishing stages. The Escort was proving it could win on smooth tarmac and rough gravel alike, though it clearly preferred the former. By mid-season, Delacour and Biazian were sitting first and second in the Drivers' Championship. Ford and Toyota were tied for the manufacturer's lead on 111 points each. The championship had become a 2-horse race, and one of those horses was a car that had existed for less than 6 months in top-level competition. Lancia, with Carlos Sainz driving a Jolly Club entered Integrale after leaving Toyota due to a sponsorship conflict with Castrol, was fading into the background. The reigning champion was watching the sport move on without him and his aging machine. Then came Sanremo. And this is where the story gets really good. Both works' Ford Escorts retired from Rally Sanremo. Delacour crashed on stage 6 in foggy conditions after winning the first 5 stages. Biazian's engine expired after a radiator hose split. A catastrophe. Except it wasn't. Franco Cunico, a 36-year-old Italian driver celebrating his birthday during the event, was piloting a privately entered Escort RS Cosworth for Ford Italia. No factory budget, no army of engineers, just a good car, good Pirelli tires, suited to the wet conditions, and a driver with something to prove. Cunico inherited the lead, defended it with everything he had, and won Rally Sanremo by over 10 minutes from the second-placed Patrick Snyders. Also in a privateer Escort Cosworth. Third place? Carlos Sainz, the reigning world champion, in a factory-backed Lancia Delta Integrale. A private entry Escort beat the defending champions Integrale. It was the first time in years that a privateer had won at world championship level. And the car that finished third behind 2 Escorts was the machine that had dominated the sport for half a decade. Lancia's reign wasn't just challenged, It was over. Delacour added one more win in Catalunya, but Toyota's Juha Kankkunen proved more consistent across the full 14-round calendar, winning in Argentina, Finland, and Australia to claim a record fourth World Drivers' title. Ford finished second in the manufacturer's standings, 145 points, to Toyota's 157. Close, but no cigar. Here's what Ford actually achieved, though. They didn't outsmart Lancia with a superior car, not exactly. They outsmarted them with a superior idea. The Integrale was designed as an integrated system: engine, transmission, suspension, body. Everything conceived together, developed together, refined together over 6 years. Elegant engineering. The name literally means integrated. The Escort Cosworth was the opposite of elegant. It was a hack. A brilliant, resourceful, slightly deranged hack. Ford took proven components from one car and physically grafted them into the shell of another. The floor pan didn't fit. They cut it and welded it until it did. The engine bay wasn't designed for a longitudinal layout. They redesigned the engine bay. The standard Escort used McPherson strut rear suspension. The Cosworth got semi-trailing arms from the Sierra, which would later be identified as one of its genuine weak points, creating unpredictable snap-over steer on loose surfaces. But the hack had a crucial advantage: speed. While Lancia spent 6 years evolving the Delta through 4 distinct versions, Ford went from crazy idea to World Championship podium in roughly 4 years, using components already proven in competition. The Cosworth engine had a decade of development behind it. The 4-wheel drive system was tested and trusted. The suspension geometry was understood. The only genuinely new engineering was the aerodynamics, and that turned out to be a breakthrough. The car's weakness was clear on gravel and snow. That rear-bias torque split, combined with conservative transmission calibration and the semi-trailing arm suspension, created a dangerous handling trap. Initial understeer would encourage a driver to commit to a corner, building speed and confidence. Then, at the exit, as weight transferred and the turbo came on song, the rear would snap into sudden, violent oversteer. No warning, no progressive slide, just a violent rotation that could put even experienced drivers into the scenery. On tarmac, skilled hands could exploit this. The snap became a weapon. Drivers like Delacour used the car's natural tendency to rotate as an advantage, pitching it into corners and riding the oversteer through the apex. It was fast and spectacular. On loose surfaces, though, the same trait was a liability. Gravel doesn't forgive sudden weight transfers the way tarmac does. Snow is even less forgiving. The combination of turbo lag followed by a rush of power to a rear-biased drivetrain on a surface with limited grip through a suspension geometry that struggled with lateral loads was a recipe for disaster. Those moments cost championships. 5 of the Escort's 8 Group A victories came on asphalt events. That pattern tells you everything. The Garrett T35 turbocharger on early cars illustrated the compromises perfectly. Big turbo, big power. The YBT engine in rally specification pushed roughly 300 horsepower, though exact numbers varied with boost settings and preparation. But that big turbo meant serious lag. Below 3,500 RPM, the engine was essentially sleeping. Then the boost arrived all at once. On tarmac, where grip levels are high, the T35 was devastating. On gravel, it was like trying to paint a watercolor with a fire hose. In 1994, Ford switched to the smaller Garrett T25 turbocharger for the road car. Peak power dropped by about 10 horsepower, but throttle response improved dramatically. The road car became more progressive, more civilized. The rally teams, naturally, kept the bigger unit. They wanted the power. Managing the delivery was the driver's problem. After the strong 1993 campaign, 94 started brilliantly. Delacour won Monte Carlo again. Everyone expected a title challenge. Then his engine failed in Portugal. A month later, he was a passenger in a friend's Ferrari F40 when it was struck by an amateur rally driver practicing for a local event. Yes, that actually happened. Delacour suffered severe leg injuries and missed 4 rounds. His championship challenge ended not on a rally stage, but in someone else's supercar, hit by someone else practicing for someone else's rally. The irony could strip paint. Tommy Mäkinen, driving the Escort on a one-off guest appearance at the Thousand Lakes Rally in Finland, won the event for his maiden WRC victory. He'd later win 4 consecutive championships with Mitsubishi, but his first triumph came in a Ford. Almost nobody remembers this. Ford shuttered their official works team after '94. Belgian team RAS Sport ran the program for an unsuccessful '95. For '96, Ford took operations back in-house and hired Carlos Sainz. The same Carlos Sainz whose Lancia had been beaten by Cunico's privateer Escort 3 years prior. Sainz delivered the Escort RS Cosworth's final Group A victory at the Rally of Indonesia. For 1997, the car was converted to World Rally Car specification. The hated semi-trailing arms were finally replaced with McPherson struts. Malcolm Wilson's team, now operating as M Sport, handled race operations. Sainz won twice more. The Escort name finally bowed out of top-level works, rallying after a double podium finish at the 1998 Rally of Great Britain. 10 WRC victories total, 8 in Group A, 2 as a World Rally car, 0 titles. Against the Integrale's 46 wins and 6 championships, the raw numbers look modest. But raw numbers are liars. Consider what happened to both manufacturers after the dust settled. Lancia left rallying entirely after 1993 and never returned. The most successful rally marque in history, with 74 WRC victories and 11 world championships, simply walked away. Without a successor to the Delta and without Fiat's appetite for continued funding, the rally program evaporated. The tooling was never used again. The institutional knowledge dispersed. Ford, by contrast, kept going. The Escort led directly to the Focus WRC, which led to the Fiesta WRC. Malcolm Wilson's M Sport team, which took over Ford's rally program during the Escort era, is still running today, still competing at the highest level of the World Rally Championship. The Escort Cosworth didn't just compete in rallying. It built the organizational infrastructure that kept Ford in the sport for the next 3 decades. And then there's what happened below the WRC, where the Escort Cosworth's real legacy lives. Patrick Snijers took 2 Belgian titles and the European Rally Championship in '94. Malcolm Wilson won the British Rally Championship the same year with 4 victories. Privateers worldwide chose the Escort because the Cosworth engine was almost infinitely tunable. The Sierra mechanicals were well understood by every workshop in Europe, and the parts supply were robust and affordable. Because the car used already widespread components, privateer teams could buy an Escort, prepare it for competition, and be genuinely competitive without a factory budget. This created an entire ecosystem of Escort Cosworth rally cars competing at every level from club events to continental championships. For the people who actually fill rally entry lists, not just the television highlights, the Escort Cosworth was the weapon of choice. The ripple effects went beyond competition. In Britain especially, the Escort Cosworth became a cultural icon. It was the poster on the bedroom wall, the car in the video game, the thing every kid pointed at when it drove past. It also became, unfortunately, the car of choice for joyriders and getaway drivers. Few police vehicles could keep pace with a stolen Cosworth. Insurance premiums went through the roof. Some cars ended up torched in fields to destroy evidence. It was simultaneously the most loved and most stolen car of its generation. The man who designed that wing went on to create the McLaren P1 and the Ferrari F430. François Delacour, the driver who gave the car its first WRC triumph, is still regarded as one of the finest tarmac rally drivers who never won a world title. The car itself now sells for north of £60,000, with pristine examples pushing deep into six figures. Walk into any rally gathering where attendees are over 40 and mention the Escort Cosworth. Watch their eyes change. That whale tail, ridiculous and magnificent in equal measure, is burned into the collective memory of an entire generation who grew up watching rally highlights on Saturday afternoon television. Lancia built a masterpiece of integrated engineering. Ford built a mongrel from borrowed parts and corporate stubbornness. The masterpiece collected more silverware. The mongrel won more hearts. And when Ford's Frankenstein creation showed up to Lancia's final competitive season in '93 and proved on the stages themselves that the great Italian empire had fallen. It did so wearing a wing inspired by a World War I triplane and standing on the bones of a completely different car. The Italians spent a decade refining the perfect rally machine. The English response was to take a family hatchback, cut the floor out, weld in a larger sedan's guts, bolt on a wing dreamed up by a kid thinking about fighter planes, and dare it to work. It worked. And there you have it, the Ford Escort RS Cosworth. A car that shouldn't exist, assembled from parts that were never meant to fit together, wearing a disguise that fooled absolutely nobody. If you've seen one in person, or you think I missed something, drop it in the comments. And if you made it this far, go ahead and subscribe. We do this every week.